Okay, so Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa usalli wa usallimu ala al-mab'uthi rahmatan lil alameen, nabiyyina wa habibina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So Alhamdulillah, it gives us great pleasure to once again welcome Brother Ustad Imran Hussein to WISE. Today will be an online lecture, but inshallah going forward, perhaps we'll invite him again inshallah and have a face-to-face conversation with him. Brother Imran is instructor and a lecturer for IERA, and he has a degree in industrial design and engineering, and he's also a student of Islamic thought and philosophy. And today, inshallah, we'll be covering a very important topic: Islam and atheism and secularism. This is something which is a big challenge to the youth of today, in that they're facing many doubts, especially as they go through their secular education, as they're going through their school. They're facing many doubts about religion, about the existence of God, and so on. And so, inshallah, it'll be very important for us to equip our brothers and sisters with the tools they need to actually counter the doubts that are raised as they face them during their lives. So inshallah, without further ado, we'll hand over to Ustad Imran, inshallah, he can deliver the talk. Jazakumullah khairan.
Jazakallah khair. Okay, bismillah and alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. I hope everyone is well, inshallah, and healthy and keeping safe, inshallah, especially during these times with COVID and everything. So today, inshallah, I'm going to try to keep it nice and short. Maybe we can have a bit of a Q&A at the end. But I want to cover, like the Sheikh said, a very important topic, which is Islam, atheism, and secularism, and how we are to understand these sort of challenges that we face today as Muslims, especially in the West. But to be honest, it's not only something we're dealing with in the West anymore. It's a global phenomenon. If you like, it's a global intellectual attack on our deen, our way of life. So we're going to be discussing these things. I'm going to briefly touch upon atheism, secularism, but what I want to sort of do today is I want to sort of present, if you like, the bigger picture. And I hope that by the end of today's session, we'll have a better understanding of, number one, where these ideologies came from, why they exist today. Not that they are predominant or that they, that many people are following them, but why they even exist today. And then along with this, more importantly, I think I want to briefly touch upon what we can do as Muslims to safeguard ourselves, as far as these things are concerned, because as the Sheikh rightly said, there are many young Muslims today that are struggling. They have doubts, they have questions, they are being misled. And they don't know where to go. Parents are worried. The youth themselves are worried. People are deflated. Muslims, especially young Muslims, are experiencing a type of meaninglessness in their deen itself. And they can't really put their finger on what's exactly going on. So we're going to try to unravel some of this stuff today, inshallah. And to start off with, I want to briefly mention, and I think it's apt in regards to the topic we're discussing, a narration of the Prophet ﷺ, where he mentioned that, and I'm paraphrasing, that there will come a time where the nations of the world will gather together and essentially come after this deen, just like people gather around a table for a feast. And a companion, in response to this, he asked, why would this be the case? Would it be because the Muslims will be less in number? And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that no, it's not because there will be less in number. There will be many Muslims at such a time. But they will be like, according to some of the narrations, they will be like the foam of the ocean. And if anyone's seen the foam that emerges on the ocean when it gathers on the beaches and it sort of clumps up together, it's very visible. The foam is very visible. You can see it. It's quite distinct. But it's very hollow. It's empty. It's full of air, and it quivers and shakes at the slightest breeze. So this description the Prophet ﷺ gave, it's so apt on so many different levels, and there's so much reflection we can do upon this. But the reason I mention this is because I think we are in such a time today where there are many Muslims across the world, many Muslims in the West, but we're struggling. You know, we're very weak. When we're facing this onslaught, these ideologies, whether it be atheism, naturalism, secularism, feminism, or any other type of ism, we don't know what to do. We feel like our iman has been shaken in many cases. In some cases, we even lose our iman or we leave Islam. And we're in a type of a crisis situation at the moment when it comes to this. And if you think about it, you know, it's a very difficult situation because, you know, the media is, generally speaking, although there are some aspects of the media which are, you know, more fair in their reporting, but generally speaking, the media is presenting a certain narrative of Islam. It's presenting Islam as this entity, this monolithic system which is out to destroy the world. You know, it's you got atheism, which is obviously, as many of us are aware, atheists and prominent atheist figures have made it almost their primary focus, especially over the past couple of years, to really hone in on and focus in on Islam and attack Islam and deconstruct Islam. You have, you know, feminism, which is again rising, and again it takes a special interest in Islam. Secularism, generally speaking, the idea where you want is to divorce their religion from their secular affairs, that again is focusing in to a degree on Islam as well. So one of the things you realize is that all of these isms and schisms that are out there today, one thing that they almost unite on, or one of their focus areas, is Islam, is to deconstruct Islam. Now, postmodernism, this postmodern, you know, world that we're a part of today, again, their whole premise is to deconstruct ideas and deconstruct views and ideologies. So they're trying hard to do the same with Islam as well. So we find ourselves in this situation where almost everyone is trying to take a piece, right? They're trying to attack Islam from one perspective or the other. Now, before I get into what we can do in regards to this, I think I want to quickly share just a little bit of history, not go too deep, but just briefly share some history with you guys, which will really put things into perspective. And one thing I want to point out is that we can't take these ideologies in isolation, right? So you can't take atheism and say that's the biggest problem, the biggest challenge to Islam. You can't take secularism and say this is the biggest challenge to Islam. You can't take feminism and say this is the biggest challenge to Islam. You can't take hedonism and say this is the biggest challenge to Islam. Postmodernism, and the list goes on. You can't look at these ideologies and perspectives in isolation. What we have to realize is that they all stem from a certain perspective, a certain ground, if you like, which allows for these ideologies to sprout. It's fertile ground for these ideologies. And that ground that I'm referring to, or that vision or perspective or philosophy, whichever way you want to look at it, was brought into effect during the period of the Enlightenment in the 17th or 18th century. During those decades, those years, one thing that happened was that there was a big shift in the way people saw reality, the way human beings understood the world and understood their lives. Prior to the Enlightenment, Europe was dominated by Christianity for hundreds of years, right? Hundreds and hundreds of years. And we're not even discussing the Muslim world. The Muslim world is a different story, so we can keep that out of the discussion for now. But the West was referred to as the Christian West. But during the Enlightenment, there was a shift. It was that period when philosophers and thinkers finally were able to break free from Christianity and move towards what they would refer to as the enlightened period, where they were free to discover, free to, you know, engage with the world, understand the world, do science, you know, build new things, come up with new technologies and all of these things, right? And this was the modern era, when the world shifted into, the West shifted into the modern era. And this shift, the Enlightenment philosophers and thinkers, there was a fundamental shift in how human beings were to understand their purpose. What was their purpose? Because human beings we need purpose. We need meaning in our lives, right? Human beings had this question: what is the meaning of my life? How do I live? By extension, that comes from the question of the meaning of life. When Christianity was predominant, whatever the case was, as oppressive as they were to free thinking and so on, whatever problems it had, one of the things it did, it still grounded humanity in the West. It grounded human beings from the perspective of meaning and purpose, because they believed in God. Whatever their distorted conception of God was and is even today, they still had a belief in God, a higher power. And what this did was this led to them understanding their lives. So they understood that they were created by God to serve God, to know God, to work for God, and all of these things. And their objective was not the dunya. Their objective, even as Christians, was the hereafter. They were waiting for the hereafter. Although their conception of how they were to attain hereafter is, again, very distorted and very different from what we believe as Muslims, they still were looking forward to a life to come, a life that was forever, that would continue. So that was the objective, the hereafter. But during the Enlightenment, there was a shift in this understanding. Now, the new objective for human beings or humanity was the dunya. It was about worldly progress. No longer was your vision to attain paradise in the hereafter. Now humanity's vision was to attain paradise on earth. So this was the new philosophy. This was the new drive for humanity that was proposed and embedded within the minds of people, which was, your objective in life is to make a better life for yourself and your future generations. Material progress, to be more specific. It was about material progress, right? That was the vision. Now, with this groundwork in place, where human beings now, their objective is to attain or improve their life as much as they can in this world, and to almost make this world a paradise for themselves. Now we can see this is the fertile ground from which all of these other ideologies started to emerge, whether it be atheism, whether it be secularism. Why atheism? There's a very interesting book by Alistair McGrath. It's called The Twilight of Atheism. He mentions that, and it's a very profound quote. He says, modernity and atheism are two sides of the same coin, right? So essentially what he's saying is modernity facilitates for atheism, and atheism facilitates this modern vision, which is worldly progress. Because to attain worldly paradise and to make the world your focus, you have to disconnect from the idea of God. You have to disconnect from the idea of the hereafter. You have to reject these ideas and things. And only then can you truly focus on the world. And only when you are led to believe that this life is all you have, and this is supposed to be your paradise, only then can you then work towards that paradise in this world. So all of these ideologies and philosophies, like I said, whether it be atheism, naturalism, secularism, feminism, all of these promote the same thing. Secularism itself, the idea that religion is to be kept for yourself and your personal, what you do behind closed doors. You don't bring religion into your worldly life, right? So even this divorcing of religion from your secular engagement in the world, that in itself, again, promotes or facilitates for the human being to focus on the dunya and to make as much as he can in this world. And this is why, and this is fundamentally the reason why all of these ideologies exist, and all of these ideologies are promoted, they're propped up, they're encouraged, is because it all ties back to that vision of modernity, which is worldly progress, a worldly utopia, paradise on earth. However, now in the past, maybe 2 or 3 decades, maybe some would say more, you have the advent of postmodernism, which is, without going into detail, which is the complete, almost a rejection of modernity, right? So they're saying, well, look, this whole idea that modernity gave you about worldly progress and that we can attain a paradise on earth, it's all nonsense. It hasn't happened. If anything, some of these systems that came into place after modernity was put in place have led to destruction and bloodshed. World War I, World War II, communism, and all of these, entities and or systems that existed during the modern period. So they're rejecting, postmodernists are now rejecting everything. But what they're also doing is and you have to give them credit, is that they're following through, because they realize that when you deny God and when you turn away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you turn away from religion, automatically what happens is you lose the ability to make sense of meaning. There is no meaning of life. There's no ultimate meaning of life. Why? Because, well, if there is no God, there is no creator, that means that the entire universe and us as human beings and our lives, everything that exists, is just a result of one big accident. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just accidentally happened. We just accidentally came into existence. Now, if this is what you believe, well, then accidents, at least from their perspective, accidents don't have a purpose. There's no reason behind them. Therefore, life at bottom is meaningless. So the postmodernists now deconstruct all of this and they say, well, look, it's all meaningless. So you know what? Let's do what you want to do. You make your own truth. You decide what the meaning of your life is. You choose to live the way you want to live. And this is why we see hedonism, especially the perspective that, the objective of life is to maximize pleasure. That's it. Now, whatever means it takes to do that, let's do that, because you only live once, right? So this is the sort of perspective of people today. And you'll see majority of people out there, especially the youth and university campuses, in colleges, this is the way people are living. Even though they may not be able to understand the sort of, categorization of this, what's going on. But this is the way people are living. Just do what you want. Enjoy yourself. You are your own God. You set the rules. You create the meaning. You do as you please, when you please. And this is why, as many of you probably already noticed, that when you give dawah to people, when you speak to non-Muslims or people out there today, it's not that they are hardline atheists. Many would even acknowledge, yeah, sure, there may be a creator, there may be something out there. But where they really have a problem is submission. They don't want to submit to God. They don't want to submit in Islam. They don't want to follow a way. They don't want direction. They don't want a structured way of life, because people have been spoiled from this perspective. So, once you get this delusion of that you are God and you set your own parameters and your own boundaries and you do what you want to do, it's hard to turn back from that. So nihilism, which is an inevitable consequence of all of this, which is that, it's all meaningless, just do what you want. It's the technical term they refer to as hedonic nihilism, which is there is no meaning, you only live once, you're an accident. But you know what? As human beings, when we do things, or fulfill our desires, it leads to pleasure and it feels good. So there's this instant gratification that takes place. Let's just carry on doing that. Let's just keep doing whatever we want to do and enjoy ourselves. Now, this may work well even from a modernist perspective, because, as long as people are enjoying themselves, that's fine. But as long as they keep, functioning within the system, which is leading to this supposed worldly utopia, then let them, and this is why even the way our weeks are structured, right? You have 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And as soon as people start getting fed up of the daily, day-to-day jobs, you get 2 days off. And what do most people do when they get these 2 days off? Go get drunk, do drugs, lose yourself, play gaming, 24/7. Just lose yourself. You want to disconnect. People want to disconnect from reality. They don't want to take responsibility. They don't want to even remind themselves or remember that they are alive. They just want to disconnect. And then come Monday, you go back to the rat race and you go back into that system again. Now, this is the sort of general state of the world and why we've ended up where we've ended up. Obviously, there's a lot more to be said in regards to this, but I don't want to take too much time going into this. But the reason I wanted to mention this, because I wanted to have us to have a clear understanding of where these supposed ideologies, such as atheism and naturalism and materialism and feminism, where they come from, where they stem from. Because if you go to each one of these ideologies individually and you look a bit deeper, you realize that their foundations are very weak. They're standing on nothing. And then it makes you wonder, well, why do they even exist today? And why are they being promoted? Well, now hopefully we can appreciate why this is the case. Now, that being said, brothers and sisters, something I want to make us aware of, something that, I've been becoming more increasingly aware of over the past couple of years, speaking to young Muslims and, Muslims in general, is that many Muslims are themselves, we ourselves are experiencing a type of nihilism. We ourselves, although we may claim to be Muslim, claim to follow Islam, we ourselves are engaging in this world and living in this world no different from the atheist or the secularist or the feminist, or the materialist or the consumerist, where our lives are very similar and hardly different from these people. And this is a big problem because one, this is going to open you up to doubts, confusion, right? It's going to remove meaning from your life because meaning you're not going to gain meaning in your life just through acknowledging something intellectually, right? Just saying, yes, I believe in Allah. Yes, I believe Islam is the truth. And then go back to living like an atheist is living or a secularist is living. Meaning is not going to come into your life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that He did not create us for any other reason except to know Him and worship Him. This is why we were created. Allah has outlined this to us. This is coming from Allah. This is not coming from another person or a human being. This is coming from the creator of the heavens and the earth, which is preserved for us in His final revelation. And Allah is telling us point blank clearly that He created us for no other reason except to worship Him, know Him and to worship Him. That is the fundamental reason behind our existence. We were created to worship Allah. Now, we can know this. We can know this statement, it's information, but it's not going to inject meaning into our lives until we live by it. And there is a big difference. And this is where we're falling short. Unless we start living by what's being said, meaning is not going to enter our lives. If we don't start worshiping Allah and trying to do that and moving in that direction, our lives are going to be full of meaninglessness. Our lives are going to be as nihilistic as the atheist nihilist that is out there or the secular nihilist that's out there. We're going to be in no better of a position. And this is why many young people are struggling. Yeah, we're Muslim, alhamdulillah, but at the same time, because we're not following through with what's being told and what's being said, we are experiencing the same problems as the non-Muslims out there. And this is a huge problem. So we have to realize first and foremost, and when it comes to now tackling these things and ideologies, one thing is to know about them, right? And to understand them, and also how to deconstruct, for example, atheism, and how to argue against atheism, and how to break down the arguments of the atheist or the secularist or whatever the case is. That's one thing. But what's more fundamental is we need to start then living by what we have, the solution, which is Islam. And we can't really help people out there if we're suffering from the same things these people are suffering from. Right? So we have to resolve things for ourselves first and foremost, brothers and sisters. And look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us clearly in the Quran that this is guidance for humanity. It's guidance for the people of taqwa, specifically. Those that are conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their creator. And what does it mean to have taqwa? It's not just something you understand logically. It's to be aware that Allah exists and aware that Allah is watching and Allah is seeing everything we do. He hears everything we do. And it's being aware of Allah's presence to the point where it changes the way you live, the way you engage in this world. So you avoid the things that are sins. You avoid the things that are bad, and you move yourself towards doing things which are good. Right? So we have to engage in this. And remember, Islam is a way of life. It's a deen. One of the things, interestingly, remember, words are very powerful. And, the powers that may be, they understand this, that words have power and concepts have power. So one of the things they did, especially over the past couple of centuries, is they took religions, what they call religions now, we're stuck with this vocabulary as well. And they took Islam and they called it a religion, right? But when you look at the definition of the word religion, especially the modern definition of the word religion, it specifically refers to a system of beliefs and actions and rituals that one engages in for themselves, right? So it's something what's being alluded to, it's something that one does personally for themselves. Again, it sort of ties in with that narrative, the secular narrative, where you don't bring religion into all aspects of life. It's just some rituals that you do in the comfort of your own home and certain set of beliefs that you have, that you hold on to. Whereas Deen, way of life, it's comprehensive. It's a complete way of life. You know, it's a complete way of life. It encapsulates every aspect of our lives. So we need to keep this in mind, and it's a system for us. It's guidance for us, as Allah said to us. And therefore we need to now not only read this guidance and understand this guidance, but start to implement this guidance into our lives. And only then can we really safeguard ourselves. Because trust me, I've been there. I've spoken to many brothers and sisters that have quote unquote doubts and you know, questions about Islam that stem from certain, you know, atheists or secularists or whatever the case is. You know, certain sisters that have come with questions stemming from feminism and things like this. You can provide answers, and we've done this. We give them a clear answer. They're satisfied, but for how long? You know, a couple of days, a couple of weeks, and then they have another question. And then you answer that question. There's a third question. You answer that question, and then there's a fourth question. Why can't they leave this loop? Why have they fallen into? It's because we're not moving forward. We get an answer. We're convinced in the moment when we get the answer, but then we just stop there, and we don't build upon that. And unless we start moving in that direction of now, okay, I understand Islam is the truth. It's been explained to me. It makes sense. Now let me do what Islam is requiring me to do. What is the requirement? I need to worship Allah. How do I do it? Allah has outlined that for me in the Quran. Let's start with the basics, the fundamentals, the 5 pillars. Let's start with the first and foremost, which is salah. Let's start with the prayer. Let's start engaging in the prayer in a meaningful way. You know, again, not just praying, meaning going through the actions, but praying with awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, consciousness of the fact that you're standing in front of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ referred to the salah as the mi'raj of the Muslim, the ascension of the Muslim. You know, and we know the mi'raj of the Prophet ﷺ was when he went to the closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, and interestingly, that was when he was given the prayers, the 5 daily prayers, which finally were reduced down to 5. This prayer, the salah, is a very powerful tool, brothers and sisters, and we're not maximizing it. We're not capitalizing on it. It's something that's going to safeguard us. It's something that's going to help us remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, so really focus on the prayer. And that is a fundamental solution to all of these issues. The prayer itself, brothers and sisters, honestly, if we think about it, it's us communicating with Allah. The Fatiha, which is considered the salah, you know, because without the Fatiha, the prayer is not valid. The Fatiha is a direct communication between us and Allah. It's a direct communication between us and our Creator. And we know, again, from the Prophet ﷺ, that when we recite the Fatiha after the ayat, Allah responds. You know, and if you look at, and one thing I always recommend is, at the very least, if you don't know Arabic, whatever the case is, the Fatiha is very short. You know, memorize the meaning of the Fatiha. You can go to online, you can get word for word translation of the Fatiha, learn the words of the Fatiha, understand the meanings. It won't take long. It takes maybe, you know, for the slowest of us, it takes a couple of weeks. But learn and understand what the Fatiha is. So when you're reciting it in your salah, you're not absent-minded. You're not somewhere else and just words are coming out of your mouth. You're connecting with the words. Because what is the Fatiha? I mean, if you look at the breakdown of the Fatiha, it's profound. It's the beginning of the Fatiha is a reminder of who it is that we're standing in front of. Who is our Creator? That's what the Fatiha opens with. It's a reminder of who our Creator is. You know, Allah said, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, that He is, all perfect thanks and praise belongs to the Rabb of the worlds, the Lord, the Master, the Maintainer, the Sustainer, the one that nurtures and provides. You know, not just an absent Creator that created everything and left everything to be, as the deists would want you to believe. You know, because some of these scientists will, you know, they're making progress. They're moving away from atheism and going towards deism. Anthony Flew was a very famous example of this. He was an ardent atheist, one of the biggest philosophers. And near the end of his life, he became a deist. You know, he believed that there is something out there. He had a mechanical conception of God, a cause that started everything and left it to be. Allah reminds us in the Fatiha in the very beginning, no, this is not Allah. Allah is the one that not only created everything, but the one that's maintaining everything, every single moment of his existence. You know, there's not a moment that goes by that Allah isn't in control of all of these things. It is Allah's power, because nothing else has any power. Everything is intrinsically has zero power. Allah created it and He's maintaining it. And that includes us and our lives and everything that we have. Every breath that we take is because Allah wills it. He allows it. So Allah reminds us in the very beginning of Al-Fatiha that He is the Rabb, the one that not only creates, but the one that maintains and sustains us. You know, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. That He is, then Allah reminds us that He is the most excessively merciful. And it's interesting that Allah has many names and attributes. But some of the names that continuously come up over and over again in the Quran and in the Fatiha is Ar-Rahman. Allah reminds us of His mercy. Rahim, His mercy. Allah wants us to focus on His mercy. And it's a loving type of mercy. You know, it's not a type of mercy which is given out of need. It's free of need. You know, Allah is free of any need, yet He is merciful. And His mercy can't be compared to anything else. Think about the most merciful, the most loving person you could think of. That person or that being or that thing is nothing in comparison to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His mercy. And Allah continuously reminds us of this. You know, and then just so we don't get too comfortable and we don't, you know, think, you know, Allah is the most merciful, I can just do whatever I want. Allah reminds us that He is the master of the day of judgment, that He is the king of the day of judgment. You know, that sure, Allah is the most merciful, but don't forget there's a day of account that's coming. And what that immediately does, it reminds us and reinforces that therefore we should be cognizant and conscious of every single step we take and every action that we make. You know, that we are being watched and we will be judged. You know, and nothing is going without account. You know, so it keeps us on the straight and narrow. You know, so there's a beautiful balance here for the Muslim. You know, that we are hopeful in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but at the same time, we don't want to take the mick, right? We don't want to just do whatever we want. Allah is the most merciful. No, remember, you'll be accounted for. Everything you do is going to be accounted. So stay on the straight and narrow. And then after all of this, then the next part of the Fatiha is profound, because once we recognize and acknowledge our Creator, the one we're engaging with in the Salah, Allah tells us, Allah tells us to say that you alone we worship and you alone we ask for help. And this is the most logical statement any human being could ever make. The most logical, intuitive statement, because once you recognize that there is a Creator, the eternal Creator who has no beginning, who has no end, who's in control of everything, the one that provides us with everything, then it logically, intuitively makes sense that who should we worship? Why should we worship anything else other than Allah? Now, the New Age guys, the atheists, the secularists, you find them saying, "Oh, I don't need to worship anyone. I'm a free person. You know, why should I submit to it? I don't submit to anything or anyone." But when you really think about it, everyone is submitting to someone or something. No one is free. In this dunya, no one is free. From the moment you're born, you go into a type of slavery. You're submitting to something or someone throughout your life without fail. We are submitting to the law. We are submitting to our bosses. You know, we are submitting to, maybe our desires, money, power. There are so many things that we may consciously or unconsciously be submitting to. It happens. Every human is subject to something or someone. You can't escape this. But here we are reminded to say, if we know who Allah is and we've recognized this, then it makes sense to submit ourselves to Allah alone. And Allah says in the Quran in another place that, He gives us the parable of a person, and He asks whose condition is better, the one who is enslaved to many masters or the one who is enslaved to one. And again, use your logic. Allah has given us the aql, the intellect. Let's use it. Does it make sense to be pulled in several different directions and submitting to this person, this ideology, that ideology, maybe our own desires? Or does it make sense in submitting to the one that's created you and gave you this life? So submission, and this is why what Allah is telling us to say here, which is that you alone we worship and you alone we ask for help, this makes complete sense. And we seek help from Allah alone because we know He's the only one that can provide help. Even if help comes through means, asbab in this world, in this dunya, it's inevitably, at the end of the day, it's coming from Allah. Allah is the one that makes the means and allows for those means to manifest in your life. So Allah reminds us of this. And then we ask, we make a dua, which is in Fatiha, we ask Allah for guidance, to be guided onto the straight path, the path of those that Allah has favored and not on the path of those who've, gone astray or in Allah's wrath. So, this, just what I'm getting at is we need to learn the meanings of this surah of the Quran, because we are reciting it every single day in our salah, and the salah is a direct communication with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, if we are reminded of this 5 times a day, because we forget as human beings, we always forget. But if we're reminded of this fundamental reality, this will keep us grounded. You know, and Allah's help will come. If you've asked Allah for guidance, Allah will guide you. You know, and as the scholars have said, we ask for guidance, and then again, we shouldn't be turning away from it when it comes. The rest of the Quran is guidance, you know, that we've asked for in the Fatiha. And again, another question is, how much do we engage with the Quran? Right? We have, you know, we're seeing the Muslim youth, they have issues, problems, doubts, confusion, all of this type of stuff, atheism, blah, 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 all of this stuff. Are we turning to the source which is going to help us and protect us and give us answers? This is another question. How many times do we read the Quran? And I'm asking myself this question as well. How many times do we engage with it in a week, you know, in a day, in a month, in a year? How many times are we engaging with the words of Allah? Guidance for us, for this life. You know, because otherwise, we can call ourselves Muslim and have Muslim names, but our lives are going to be meaningless. There's going to be no meaning to our lives. Like I said, if we are going to live replicating the secularists or the atheists or the feminists, well, then don't expect your life to be any more meaningful than their lives are, right? Because how you live is key. That's what's going to bring the meaning into your life. You know, and Allah says in the Quran that, you know, that there is nothing for human beings except what they strive for, what they work for, what they put in the effort for. In this dunya, this is the way the system is. This is how it works. You have to make the first move, brothers and sisters. It's not good enough, you know, to have a question, get an answer, and then just sit there on the answer until you get another question or another doubt in your mind, right? You have to move forward, start working to develop your relationship with Allah, because trust me, the certainty that's going to come into your hearts from connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And trust me, I'm talking from 10 years of experience. And the reason I'm mentioning this because I want you guys to understand this. The certainty that's going to enter your heart from connecting with Allah, you're not going to find that in a logical, rational argument, you know, or a quote unquote proof for God's existence or a refutation of atheism. It's going to come through connecting with Allah, through engaging with the system that Allah has provided for us. This is the real solution. This is the only way we can safeguard ourselves, because there's a big storm out there, brothers and sisters, right? And there's a huge storm. The only way you're going to safeguard yourself is if you build yourself that shelter, and that's only going to come through connecting with the Quran, connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the salah, and doing the basics. As Allah says in Surah Al-Asr, you know, that surely, without a doubt, mankind, human beings, all of us are in a state of loss. And there is an exception. And this is the bare minimum. These exceptions, there's 4 qualities that Allah outlines next. This leads to, you know, is the bare minimum we need to do to be successful, which is believe. Number 1, believe. Number 2, do good deeds, engage in doing good actions. Number 3, advise others to the truth and advise others to patience. You know, so do these fundamentals. It's only 4 things. So remember these 4 things and try to implement these 4 things into your everyday life. Now, implementing these tools is key. And this is why I wanted to mention this first, before, you know, I went into the whole, so let's deconstruct these philosophies and ideologies. Because trust me, once you do all of these things and you engage with the Quran, because the answers are in the Quran, you know, you'll be able to deconstruct these ideologies yourself. I'll give you an example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that I think it's in Surah Al-Hashr, where Allah says, and do not be like those who forgot Allah, and Allah made them forget themselves. They are the ones who are the true transgressors. Right? Here Allah is speaking about a group of people that turned away from Allah, and as a result, they don't know who they are anymore. Right? Now let's think about this. Where does this apply? Take the atheist, for example. Right? We mentioned it earlier. You turn away from God. As soon as you deny God, you can't make sense of meaning. If you can't make sense of meaning, then what are you? Who are you? Without meaning, you're nothing. Right? So you lose track of who you are. Allah says in the 52nd chapter of the Quran, verses 35 and 36, were they created by nothing, or were they the creators of themselves, or did they create the heavens and the earth? But rather they are not certain. You want logic, you want argumentation, you want something that's going to establish or get you to realize the reality of Allah, look at these ayats. Forget the philosophical, arguments such as the Kalam and all of those arguments are good, they have their place. But the greatest arguments, which connect on many more levels than just up here, are going to be found in the Quran. Look at the way Allah puts it. Were they created by nothing? Think about yourself. Could you come from nothing? Were they the creators of themselves? Could you create yourself? Could you bring yourself into existence? Or did they create the heavens and the earth? Now, let alone making sense of your own measly little existence, these insignificant small creatures that we are from one perspective, that Allah is asking us, can I come from nothing? The focus is on myself. Can I create myself? The focus is on myself. And then there's a shift. Allah says, oh, did you create the heavens and the earth? Not only does this argument establish that the only real conclusion is that Allah created everything, and Allah is maintaining everything, but along with this, it really hits you on a very deep level, because it humbles you as well, that you can't make sense of your own existence. How are you going to make sense of, how in the world can you create the universe? This universe, this entire universe, which came into existence before you, therefore making it even more impossible for you to have a hand in creating it in some way. This entire universe, as big as it is and as amazing as it is, and the fact that it allows for intelligent life to exist, all of this was created by an uncreated creator, Allah. So you're going to find all of this in the Quran. You're going to find these arguments in the Quran. Someone has, as an objection, is Allah one? What does Allah say? Had there been other creators besides Allah within the heavens and the earth, both the heavens and the earth would have been ruined, destroyed. Again, ponder upon these ayat. Think about the logic here. It's very clear. Allah, we know Allah is all powerful. Allah's will is imposing. He's al-Qahar. His will is imposing. Allah does not answer to anyone. Allah is not subject to any other being. Now we know this about Allah. Therefore, let's think, could there be other beings besides Allah? Could there be other gods besides Allah? Well, no, because if there are other beings, then there would be conflict. Allah would not be compromised. And therefore, if there's conflict, everything will be ruined. Everything will be in chaos, as Allah says. So you will find arguments, answers in the Quran that satisfy you logically, that satisfy you spiritually, that satisfy you emotionally, that provide a clear roadmap for you as to how to live. And trust me, brothers and sisters, all of these ideologies that are out there, whether it be atheism, feminism, whatever the case is, when you look into them, you study them, you realize they are fundamentally flawed. It's just self-worship. It's just man, woman thinking that they are God themselves and they are independent and they know best. That is the fundamental driving force behind all of this. They're weak. There's no foundation for them. And maybe in the Q&A, if you guys have specific questions in regards to atheism, secularism, etc., we can address those. But this is what I wanted to share with you, brothers and sisters. All of these issues that we have, whether it's doubts, whether it's feeling low in Iman, whatever the case is, the solution is there. It's been there. It's preserved, and it changed. Just to conclude, just think about the people it changed. The Arabs in 1400 plus years ago in the desert, these people, no one gave them the time of day. You had superpowers on both sides, great civilization. They didn't have time for them because there was nothing they had to offer. These were people that were burying their daughters alive. These were people, that were engaged in so many different sins, right? Islam came and changed them. And within 100 years of the Prophet's death, Islam had spread and conquered so many different areas of the world, and unheard of before, at such a speed, at such a rate. And the Islamic civilization lasted for so many hundreds of years, 1,000 years in India, 800 years in Spain. Why did it decline? History, we should look into history because there's lessons in it for us. Why did these great civilizations decline? It was because we turned away from the truth. We turned away from adhering to what Allah had given us, and our eyes or our focus shifted towards the dunya. As soon as that happened, everything falls apart. The demise of civilizations, even historically, has always been when they've morally degraded and the world, the material has become their focus and what drives them. That's when they crumble. So we should look for, and all these problems we're having now, this intellectual storm, all of these things that's going on, the reason we're suffering is because we haven't turned back to we haven't connected with and engaged with and implemented and, grabbed onto what Allah has given us in the Quran, in the Sunnah. And as soon as we do this, things will start to fall back into place. And not only would you protect yourselves and safeguard yourselves and your future generations, but you will also become beacons of light, inshallah, for all of those non-Muslims out there that need this guidance. And trust me, the crisis of the 21st century of modernity and postmodernism is meaning. That is the fundamental crisis. People don't know who they are. They don't know what the meaning of life is. People are just trying to lose themselves just to ignore this question or turn away from this question. We have the answers. Allah has given us the answers in the Quran. Clearly, He's outlined everything. But we have to first and foremost implement this for ourselves and then to carry this message to people. Because remember, that is a duty. Surah Al-Asr, going back, Allah says, and those that advise to the truth and advise to patience. We have to carry this message. Why does Allah refer to us as the best of nations? Why does it's not just we are the best of nations, khalas, let's sit down, do nothing. Allah says, because you enjoin the good and you forbid the evil. So, these are, and the da'wah is key. It's going to be a key part of this whole process. It's our responsibility, to carry this message to other people. But we have to first and foremost, strengthen our own walls and our own homes and ourselves, and then go out there and carry this message to others, inshallah. So I'll wrap up there, brothers and sisters. If you have any, inshallah, questions, we can do a Q&A. I'll give it back to the Sheikh, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan for, mashallah, very enlightening and comprehensive talk. Alhamdulillah. For those online, if you have any questions, you can type your questions in the chat on YouTube, or you can WhatsApp them to me directly. There is a lag between the Zoom call and YouTube. So while we're waiting for some questions to get asked, there's some questions I have as well. So we have this attitude, live and let live, which we find actually quite prevalent amongst our Muslim youth as well today. I guess it's one of the consequences of nihilism anyway. Is this attitude a valid attitude for Muslims to have, or is it, what should our response, or what is our attitude towards this principle of life, live and let live?
Yeah, I think it's the attitude itself is it's telling of this whole nihilistic perspective, this whole sort of selfish, YOLO mentality, which is, it's all about my life. As long as I can enjoy myself and I don't impede on anyone else's freedom and I don't affect anyone else negatively, it's fine. Let them do what they want to do. I'll do what I want to do. As long as we're doing what leads to maximum pleasure, that's fine. Let's just enjoy ourselves. It's hedonism. Yeah. And for us Muslims, I don't see this as the correct perspective, because this perspective removes all responsibility from you as a person that's a part of a bigger community. And the Muslim, our community is a responsibility upon us. We are responsible for the people around us. When the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina, if you look at the treaties that he put into place with the Jews and the people of Medina, he highlighted the Prophet ﷺ was concerned about the non-Muslims as well. He's concerned about the whole community as a whole, how we stand and how we develop as a community together. That attitude is a reckless one, where we just do whatever you want, and as long as you don't harm me and I don't harm you, let's just all do what we want to do. Human beings can't function like this. Imagine everyone took that stance. Where would we be? Everyone just will be running themselves into the ground, and it's inevitable. You're going to impede on someone else's freedom at some point anyway if you take that attitude or that approach. Muslims, we need to be responsible. We have to take on responsibility. When Allah refers to us as, or Adam alayhi salam, as a viceroy upon earth, Allah gave Adam the knowledge of all things. It's responsibility. It's not just a case of, come, live, survive, and then die. No, you have to, as Muslims, we should be thinking, how do I leave my community better than it was before I became a part of it? How do I improve the lives of my non-Muslim friends? How do I improve the lives of my friends? It's about nasiyah to Muslims, advice to Muslims, and advice to non-Muslims as well. And if anything, da'wah to non-Muslims first and foremost. You don't want them on the Day of Judgment, turning around and saying, yeah, I knew this guy for 50 years, 30 years, 20 years. He didn't tell me anything about Islam. So we can't have this attitude. We have to be, I don't want to control. I'm not trying to control your life. I'm not trying to take over your life. but I'm concerned about you as a human being. And I feel I need to share what I've discovered to be the truth with you because you deserve it as much as I do. You know, I can't see you doing something wrong. And I mean, the Prophet ﷺ was the most beautiful example of this. You know, the example of where he referred to himself as a man that's trying to stop moths from flying into the fire. And it was a genuine concern he had for the people around him. He's empathetic towards the people around him. You know, but again, the world we live in today, it sucks this out of you. Most people today, especially the West, they're not concerned about other people. And unfortunately, as Muslims, we have the same type of attitude as well. You know, and it's best displayed in most cases on Jummah when we block people's driveways and, you know, and carelessly worry about only us making sure that we get our worship done. And probably the old lady down the road wants to go to a hospital appointment and we just block the drive and she's not going to be able to make an appointment. All of these small things add up, you know, about being responsible. We have to be responsible, Sheikh. Sure.
Also alluded to, I guess, in your talk, would it be correct to say that atheism, secularism, all these isms, they're really just driven by base desires, and it's driven by the desire to be unencumbered rather by moral codes or having a moral compass? Could we say that that's an accurate description of these isms in the world today?
Yeah, so it's two things. It's one is that it stems from the Enlightenment ideology of worldly progress, right?
Yeah.
So it goes hand in hand with that. That allows for it to flourish, and therefore it's also promoted. But secondly, it also serves the function of allowing people to do whatever they want without any constraints, without any accountability. So you can see, this is why when people adopt atheism, it's not because most atheists aren't atheists because they're logically convinced of atheism or they're logically convinced that God doesn't exist. Most atheists are atheists because it's comfortable in the world that we live in today. It suits them, you know, it allows for them to go and enjoy themselves and do what they want, no accountability. And, you know, it ties in with the whole philosophy of the world, which is, you know, material progress. So it's a combination of the two things.
Okay, and also it's quite common, again, common amongst our youth that when they get attracted by atheism and secularism, they make the claim that atheism and secularism, etc., are rational in their basis. They have scientific fact and empirical evidence to support them. What was your answer or observations be about this statement that atheism is rational in its basis?
Well, it's not. It's a negative to start off with. You know, they're saying that God does not exist. This is a knowledge claim, right? So, and a true atheist has to maintain that God or gods in plural don't exist. So they're making a positive logical claim. Now, they have zero evidence to support this because there's no way they can definitively prove, especially using the methods they rely upon, such as empiricism or science, that God does not exist. Because science it deals with the material physical world. It deals with the things we can observe through our senses. Now, automatically, at least from an Islamic perspective, and it applies to other religions too, we don't believe in a God that's a part of the material world, right? Allah is not a part of his creation. So science doesn't have a foot in the door. Science can't directly prove or disprove God's existence. So the atheist has nothing else to go on. They may have philosophy, but philosophically, again, there is nothing definitive. There's no definitive argument that God doesn't exist. The best they have is the problem of evil, but that, again, from an Islamic perspective, very easily breaks down. So it's just wishful thinking. They've convinced them. They try to convince themselves this is the case. But I mean, science. What science can do, what we can do is we can ask, well, indirectly, what is science suggesting? You know, in regards to, is there something that caused this universe that we're observing? There's two camps in regards to this amongst the scientists. You have the atheist scientists, and then you have the theist or God-believing scientists, right? And they're both, but again, it's not a direct question of science. If anything, there's the newer research and is suggesting that it seems like there's something there has to be a cause. Whether you look at the laws of physics, you look at the information within the DNA, you look at biology generally, all of these things, they're pointing towards the fact that there must be something behind all of this. It can't just formulate itself and come into existence.
Yeah. Okay, and you mentioned the problem of evil, and this is actually a very common reason for people to claim or justify their lack of belief in God, in that I don't believe in a God that causes earthquakes or tsunamis or causes babies to die or to be, innocent baby children to be killed, or people born with disabilities, etc., etc.? I know it's a complicated question, but in brief, what would our answer be to that?
The best thing to do is read the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr in the Quran. That is an answer. That's a clear answer, because Musa accompanies this man Khidr, Allah has given him certain knowledge, which is of the future. Now, from Musa's, and we learn through the example of Musa alayhi salam in this story, because Musa alayhi salam, according to his Sharia, according to his way, and according to him engaging in this dunya, which is, we're moving through serial time and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. That knowledge is with Allah. Khidr does certain things which on the surface and in that moment, they don't make sense to Musa. So Musa reacts. He says, well, why did you do this? Why did you damage the boat of these poor fishermen? Right? But it's because Khidr knew that, of the fact that there was a king that was trying to seize the boats and so on. If they got the boat, the fishermen would eventually maybe die because they'd have no means of livelihood. By damaging the boat, the king won't take it. All he has to do is patch the boat up and they keep the boat and they're back in business. So the point here is, what the story teaches us is that Allah is Al-Hakim. There is wisdom behind everything that happens. Allah knows the past, present, future. Allah is aware of everything. He's all-knowing. Therefore, there will be things that happen in our lives which may materialize as a test for us, from our perspective, something that we need to just be patient with. But inevitably, there's always a reason and a wisdom behind why things happen. Now, what happens is, as human beings, from our limited perspective, we jump. Something happens, quote unquote, something bad happens, or we see it as bad, and we say, oh my God, why did God do this? Why did I have to fail my exams? Why did this earthquake have to happen in this region with these poor people? From our limited perspective, we can't make sense of it, right? But that doesn't mean just because we can't understand the wisdom that there isn't any wisdom there, right? If we were to take the position and say that, look, I can't see the wisdom, there is no wisdom, that's arguing from ignorance. That's just putting yourself in the position of God, assuming that you have gone through all of the possible wisdom that could be there and you can't see any, right? We're limited. Allah is all-knowing, and this is where Iman comes into the whole scheme of things. As Muslims, our job, Allah hasn't told us to try to be all-wise and understand the wisdom behind everything that happens. Allah has told us to have Iman, have faith in, and that also means that there will be things that happen, and you just have to have faith in Allah, knowing that Allah wants best for you, and inevitably there is good in this for you, although you can't see it right now. And you have to be okay with that, with Iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And it's a powerful tool that Allah has given us, to have faith in the one that wants best for us, right? And it happens in our lives all the time, Sheikh. Like, sometimes something happens, you can't make sense of it. 2 years later, 2 months later, you reflect back and you think, if that didn't happen, I wouldn't be where I am today. So why do we experience it? Why does this happen? It's because 2 months have passed, and therefore you've experienced what was once to be the future. Now you've gone through that, and now you can connect the dots because now you've gone to the other side. But in that moment, 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, prior, you didn't have the full picture. You only had some aspects of knowledge and information that you were trying to understand the best you could. And in most cases, we can't. So this is where we've put our trust in Allah. And if Allah wills, we'll understand the wisdom behind things that happen in our lives that we couldn't make sense of once upon a time. If Allah doesn't will it, then it wouldn't be the case, right? But what's key for us as Muslims is when something bad happens, is to keep our Iman in Allah, our faith strong in Allah, reminding ourselves that Allah is all-knowing, reminding ourselves that Allah wants best for us, reminding ourselves that inevitably for the believer, it's always good. At the end of the day, everything is good. And that tool itself that Allah has given us, and having patience, if we can implement these things in difficult times, that will get us through these times. And if we can do that, that's our acknowledgement of Allah. That's our worship of Allah. That would earn the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa
ta'ala. And finally, from me anyway, you mentioned that Islam is a complete way of life, and because it gives us guidance in every circumstance to be the best we can be in terms of our capacity as servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore we get contentment because we're fulfilling what our fitrah wants of us. Could we say that any other way of life out there is complete? And can we say that any lifestyle that's driven by hedonism or nihilism, etc., can lead to some form of contentment for a human being?
Okay, so the answer to the first question is from what I've gone over the different religions, the different ideologies today, there is no system out there that's complete, right? You're always going to find holes. You're always going to find holes and problems and issues in what they refer to as cosmology, which is not our modern understanding of cosmology, which is how the universe came to be from a materialist perspective. When I say cosmology, I'm saying how we understand life holistically overall, how we make sense of it. There is no complete cosmology out there. Islam is the only one. Islam is the only way that completely and comprehensively makes sense, provides an answer to all aspects of life, all aspects, Sheikh. You know, so for example, I'll give one example quickly. There's always been this confusion throughout history in regards to the two aspects of nature. So one aspect is, when you look at the universe as a whole from a bird's eye perspective, there seems to be, or from a scientific perspective, there seems to be such amazing order. You know, there's laws that allow for intelligent life. Everything is so fine-tuned. But then from another perspective, when it comes to our engagement in this world, there's chaos, there's hardships, there's trials, tribulations, and all of these things. Now, philosophers, other religions, they've never been able to reconcile these two things. Islam comprehensively reconciles both. You know, we know the universe is ordered because Allah created it, and He created it so intelligent life could exist in this world. And we also know that there's trials and tribulations in this world because Allah tells us this life is a test. So we're going to face these things. So it's perfectly designed, and Islam provides a complete answer to this picture, and every other aspect as well. I just gave this one example. As far as finding happiness or contentment in other ways, such as hedonism or nihilism, the answer is you may experience a sense of fulfillment and pleasure in the short term, but again, it will leave you wanting. It's not comprehensive. There's not what you'd call true peace or tranquility that's going to come from these ways. It'll just be that as the dopamine release, the instant sort of stimulation, and that euphoric feeling maybe where you feel good, you have had some pleasure, but then that dies down, and then you have to. It's like a drug basically, and you have to keep. And we know with drugs, each time you take a drug, you need to take more of that dose to have the same effect. And eventually you get to the point where it kills you, right? So that's what's going to happen with these things as well. You know, you're going to only fulfill your pleasures so much to the point where it's going to take you out, basically. So true peace and tranquility is only going to come when we realign ourselves with our true purpose, which is to know Allah and to worship Him. And when we start to do this, that peace and tranquility, there's nothing comparable to that in this world.
Questions from online. Is religion purely a private matter?
No, it isn't. It's Islam isn't. You know, maybe other religions are, or other philosophies are. Look, it's private from the perspective that you're accountable for your own deed, right? So you have to. It's your decision whether you worship Allah or not. No one can make that for you. That's private, right? That's between you and Allah. But from that point on, when it comes to living your deed and fulfilling your obligations as a Muslim, then it's not a private matter. You know, then it's a case of you have to be the sort of pinnacle of what a human being can be. You know, a mu'min, as Allah describes in the Quran. And we all have to aspire to try and reach those levels, inshallah. May Allah help us. But we have to continuously try to better ourselves, you know, so that we can not only be good for our own souls, but we can also help other human beings. You know, we have to be useful for humanity. We have to be useful for humanity. Otherwise, it's, you know, we're not fulfilling our objective.
And the final question, how can I connect to God if I can't see Him?
This comes as a problem because of this conditioning and this brainwashing we receive, because of the environment that we're a part of. Because what's pumped into our minds throughout childhood is seeing is believing. You know, if you can see something, then it is real or exists or it's meaningful. If you can't see it, it's useless. It's as good as not existing. We have to sort of free ourselves from these shackles first, right? We have to tell ourselves that, look, why is this concept true in the first place? Seeing is believing. Is it true? You know, and this is why it's good to look at the history as well, because looking at the history is going to allow you to free yourself. Look, seeing isn't always believing. There's many things we can't see, we can't physically engage with that exist, right? There's things around us, like, you know, microwaves and electromagnetic waves and so many different things, you know. There's so many things within our own bodies that we believe exist that we can't see, that we'll never see in our lives, hopefully, right? Inshallah. So the point is that seeing isn't always believing. Now, how did the brother or sister phrase the question, Sheikh?
How can I connect to God if I can't see Him?
So yeah, so how do you connect now is the way Allah has told us to connect to Him. You know, there is a way that Allah has given us to make this process easy for us. Because look, people before religion and even in intervals between revelation from Allah, you know, have always tried to connect with the higher power throughout history, right? And they were not fortunate to have revelation in many cases. So they were just, you know, trying different things and trying to make things work and so on and so forth. But we are blessed with a direct way that's been outlined for us. You know, and like I mentioned throughout the presentation, that the salah is one of the, if not the most fundamental aspects of connecting with Allah. There is no better way. There's literally no better way than to connect with Allah than the way He's outlined for us. And the way, and so now the question is, how do I engage in my salah in a way that I can actually start to connect with Allah? Because I think that's what we really need to focus on. The way is what we asking, what is the way is a non-question, because Allah has given us the way. How do we now, okay, we know what the way is, how do we now maximize that way? How do we really engage it? That's the question we should be thinking about. And for that, you know, Sheikh, you know, inshallah, maybe you have some tips and advice in regards to this, but some of the things I mentioned, just to summarize again, know what you're reciting, at least as far as the Fatiha is concerned, you know, because that's your direct communication with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have khushu, you know, which is and khushu is having concentration of mind and heart and body all at the same time in what you're doing, you know. So it's so you're not distracted. And one of the ways that's going to happen is if you know what you're saying. Take your time, don't rush with the salah. You know, remind yourself before you go into the salah of what you're about to do. Because a lot of times these days we just do things heedlessly. We don't think, okay, time to pray, go start, done, out of the, you know, get out of the way. But yeah, just be conscious. Maybe anything else, Sheikh, you want to add as far as, you know,
that's
connecting?
enough. Inshallah, jazakumullah khairan. Inshallah, so we'll stop there. Jazakumullah khairan for taking the time out, Ustad, and giving us really, really, mashallah, enlightening talk. May Allah bless you and your family. I mean, and we'll stop there. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanaka wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.